Rhea, it's a lie.
Time left to return, 7 minutes.
People, don't fly here. It's not salvation, it's a nightmare.
The Earth was dying. That was the official story. For over a century, the planet had been ravaged by human greed, negligence, and war. Rising seas swallowed cities, unrelenting storms battered coastlines, and the air itself had turned into a poison that corroded lungs and dreams alike. The land was barren, stripped of its vitality, incapable of supporting life. Those who remained lived in squalor, scraping by on the outskirts of abandoned civilizations, while the privileged had already escaped. Their salvation had a name, Rhea. It was said to be the new Eden, the future humanity had long sought. The first settlers arrived nearly 50 years ago, hailed as pioneers who would rebuild what Earth had lost. The planet was lush, a fertile paradise orbiting a twin star system, untouched by the sins of humankind. The government called it humanity's second chance. For Laura Portman, that promise was more than just a dream, it was a lifeline. She had lived on orbital station K-77 for 7 years, watching as the privileged few bought their passage to Rhea, while the rest withered in the cold, metallic shell of space stations that circled the dying Earth. Each day she saw the same faces, hollow-eyed refugees, engineers struggling to maintain failing infrastructure, children who had never seen an open sky. Laura wasn't meant to be here. Her sister, Ariane, had escaped years ago. She had won a coveted visa to Rhea in a government lottery, one of the few remaining ways an ordinary person could set foot on paradise. She had promised Laura that one day she would send for her, that they would be together again under the blue skies of a world untouched by disaster. But the call never came. At first, Laura had dismissed it as a delay, a bureaucratic mistake. But as the years passed and her messages to Ariane went unanswered, doubt began to take root. Maybe she had forgotten. Maybe she had moved on. Maybe Rhea wasn't the paradise they had promised. But Laura wasn't ready to give up. She refused to believe that her sister had abandoned her. She had to get there, no matter the cost. A deal with the devil. Travel to Rhea wasn't just expensive, it was impossible for most. The government-controlled Kuiper Enterprises, the corporation that owned and operated all interstellar travel, dictated who could leave and who was doomed to remain. If you weren't wealthy, powerful, or chosen, your fate was sealed. But there was one way out. The cargo ship Cassandra was set to make an 8-year round-trip mission to Station Number 42, an unmanned research outpost on the fringes of known space. The job was simple: sleep through most of the journey in cryo-sleep, take a shift monitoring the ship, and return to Earth. The pay was substantial, enough to secure a ticket to Rhea upon completion of the mission. It was a gamble, but it was the only one she had. Laura signed the contract without hesitation. When she boarded the Cassandra, she was met by 5 other crew members, all strangers, all equally desperate for something. Captain Lacroix, a hardened leader with an air of quiet authority. Lindbergh, his second-in-command, sharp-eyed and ambitious. Prokop and Vespucci, engineers who spoke in murmured tones, already focused on the mission ahead. And Yoshida, the ship's analyst, whose fingers never left the console of her datapad. Then there was Decker. Unlike the others, he wasn't a member of the crew. He was security. His presence was unusual, and his demeanor even more so. He was calm, too calm, his dark eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made Laura uneasy. Why would a simple cargo mission require a security officer? It didn't take long to get an answer. Captain Lacroix wasted no time in delivering a warning. "We've received threats," he said, his voice firm. "From a group known as the Machine Strikers, Neo-Luddites. They don't believe in space travel, don't believe in what we're doing here. They've attacked Kuiper ships before." The words hung in the air like a weight. Laura had heard of them. Radicals who believed technology had doomed the human race, that Earth's suffering was a consequence of arrogance. Their solution was simple: destroy all interstellar efforts and force humanity to live and die with the planet it had ruined. Decker brought up a face on the monitor, a man with sunken eyes and a scar cutting across his cheek. Klaus Bruckner, the leader of the Machine Strikers. A fanatic, a terrorist. He had sworn to bring down every ship Kuiper Enterprises sent into the void. As the crew prepared for cryo-sleep, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. She had joined this mission to find her sister, to reach Rhea, to escape Earth. But something was wrong. The Cassandra was not just carrying construction materials, as she had been told. The mission wasn't just about reaching station number 42. There were secrets buried beneath the surface. And as Laura settled into her cryopod, taking one last breath before the cold sleep took her, one thought lingered in her mind. What had she really signed up for? The silence of space was absolute. For most of the journey, Laura had been unconscious, suspended in the dreamless void of cryo-sleep. But now, as she woke from her deep freeze, the weight of the mission returned to her like a vice tightening around her chest. Her mind was sluggish, her limbs stiff, her throat dry. The transition from cryo-sleep was never easy, but this time, something felt off. The Cassandra was still humming, its artificial systems keeping the ship running, but there was a tension in the air that she couldn't quite place. She was alone. The rest of the crew remained in their pods, locked in suspended animation until their designated shifts. It was Laura's turn to monitor the ship, a stretch of 8.5 months spent awake while the others slept. She was responsible for system maintenance, course correction, and security monitoring, a monotonous but necessary routine. For the first few weeks, she followed the schedule diligently. She checked the engine efficiency, monitored the oxygen and water filtration systems, and sent regular status reports back to Kuiper Enterprises, though there was never an immediate response. Communication delays were expected this far from Earth. At night, she would record video messages for Ariane, hoping that one day her sister would receive them. There was something comforting about speaking into the void, even if she never knew if anyone was listening. But then the noises started. Something was watching. At first, Laura convinced herself that it was nothing, a trick of the mind, a symptom of isolation. Being alone on a ship this size could do strange things to a person, and the quiet played tricks on the brain. But as the days stretched on, the feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the hum of the ship or the groan of metal contracting in the cold of space. It was something else, something subtle, like the faintest whisper of movement just beyond her field of vision. She started checking the security feeds more often. The ship had dozens of motion-sensitive cameras, each displaying the same thing: empty corridors, silent machinery, the flickering glow of control panels. Nothing, but still, she felt it. Then came the knocking. She was in the control room when she heard it. 3 dull thuds echoing through the cargo bay. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't part of the ship's natural creaks and shifts. It was deliberate. She froze, heart pounding. No one else was awake. With a slow, measured breath, she unfastened the emergency sidearm from its holster on the wall. A standard-issue plasma gun meant more for deterrence than actual combat. Gripping it tightly, she stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The cargo bay loomed ahead, its heavy doors sealed tight. The lights inside flickered as she approached. Another knock, then another. She swallowed hard. Every instinct in her body told her to turn back, to call for help, but there was no one to call. With a trembling hand, she keyed in the access override. The doors hissed open. The bay was empty. A ghost in the machine. Laura stepped inside cautiously, her breath shallow. The rows of sealed cargo containers stretched out before her, each labeled with serial numbers and barcodes. She had never questioned what was inside before. The official cargo manifest had stated construction materials, but now, standing in the dim glow of the emergency lights, doubt gnawed at her mind. The bay was freezing, colder than the rest of the ship. Then she saw it, a symbol crudely painted onto the metal wall near the farthest row of containers. Biohazard. The breath hitched in her throat. Why would there be a biohazard warning in a cargo bay supposedly carrying construction materials? Before she could process it, a shadow moved behind her. Laura spun around, weapon raised. A figure emerged from the darkness. Decker. She exhaled sharply, lowering her gun slightly. He wasn't supposed to be awake. He raised his hands, a flicker of amusement in his dark eyes. "Easy there, Doc. No need to shoot." Laura clenched her jaw. "What the hell are you doing here?" Decker smirked, stepping forward casually. "Same thing as you, investigating a noise." But his presence set off alarms in her head. Security personnel weren't meant to interfere in ship operations unless there was an active threat. The fact that Decker had woken up on his own meant one thing. He had overridden the cryosleep protocols. And that wasn't just suspicious. It was impossible. Decker leaned against one of the containers, arms crossed. "Something wrong, Doc." Laura's grip on her gun tightened. "Did you hear that knocking?" His expression didn't change. Knocking? She didn't trust him, not fully, but there was no one else awake. If something was wrong on this ship, she had to find out what. Together, they searched the cargo bay, moving between the towering stacks of metal crates. The air was thick with something stale, a scent Laura couldn't quite place. It wasn't the sterile metallic tang of the ship's recycled oxygen. It was something organic. They reached the farthest row of containers. Decker glanced at her, then keyed in a security override. The container unlocked with a hiss. Inside, illuminated by the dim glow of the emergency lights, was a child. A girl no older than 10, suspended inside a cryogenic chamber. Her small frame was curled in on itself, tubes connected to her spine, her head covered in a neural interface. Her eyes were closed, her body frozen in an unnatural stillness. Laura's blood ran cold. This wasn't construction material. Decker let out a slow breath. Well, that's not supposed to be here. Laura turned to him, her voice shaking. What the hell are we transporting? For the first time, Decker didn't have an answer. The truth was buried somewhere in the cold, sterile corridors of the Cassandra. And whatever it wasn't meant to be found. Laura's fingers hovered over the control panel, her breath unsteady as she watched the cryogenic chamber's screen flicker to life. The data stream scrolled before her eyes, heartbeat, neural activity, metabolic rate, each indicator confirming the same terrifying fact. The girl inside the container was alive, not just in stasis, but functioning, connected. Decker stood beside her, his usual air of confidence shaken. His jaw was tight, eyes locked on the child, as if staring too long would make her disappear. He had seen a lot in his years with Kuiper Enterprises, but this was something else. She's linked to something, Laura murmured, running her fingers over the VR interface embedded in the child's spine. This is integrated technology, but it's fused into her nervous system, like she was born with it. Decker exhaled sharply. That doesn't make sense. The Kuiper Manifest said this was a materials transport mission, not human cargo. There shouldn't be anyone else on this ship but us. Laura barely heard him. She was already tapping commands into the biometric scanner, overriding the chamber's security encryption. The moment the file decrypted, her stomach clenched. Subject 6. A. Neural AI conduit status. Active origin. Unspecified destination. Rhea. Her throat went dry. A neural AI conduit? Decker shifted beside her. Explain, Doc. What the hell are we looking at? She swallowed. She's not just a passenger, she's a part of something bigger. This is next-level integration. Her brain is wired into a network. He frowned. You're saying she's... what, a machine? No, Laura whispered, glancing at the girl's face. She's human. But something has been built into her. Something they don't want us to know about. Decker's expression darkened. And they were sending her to Rhea. The mention of Rhea made Laura's stomach twist. For years, humanity's last hope had been placed in that planet. A world of lush green landscapes, pure air, and endless opportunity. At least, that's what the broadcasts had said. But something was wrong. She had always believed that Rhea was real, that it was salvation. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of a cargo bay, staring at a child wired into an unknown system, being transported like freight to a paradise that had never been seen with human eyes. A chill ran down her spine. Decker, what if Rhea isn't what they say it is? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the panel on the chamber's exterior and pressed a sequence of keys. The lock disengaged with a soft hiss, and the glass casing retracted. The cold mist of cryo-sleep spilled into the room. The girl's eyelids fluttered. Then she opened her eyes, awake and aware. For a long, tense moment, the child didn't move. Laura's breath caught. She had expected a struggle, panic, disorientation, maybe even screaming. But the girl simply blinked, her pupils adjusting to the dim cargo bay light. Decker stepped back, hand twitching toward his sidearm. She shouldn't be waking up this fast. Laura shot him a glare. She's not a threat. He didn't look convinced. The girl slowly turned her head, her expression eerily calm. Then, in a voice that wasn't entirely human, she spoke. "Why did you open the container?" Laura's heart slammed against her ribs. The girl's tone wasn't that of a frightened child. It was controlled, deliberate. There was no confusion, no fear, only knowledge. Laura knelt down, trying to soften her approach. "We needed to make sure you were okay. Do you remember your name?" The girl hesitated, blinking as if processing the question. Then she murmured, 6A. Laura exchanged a glance with Decker. That wasn't a name. That was a designation. "Who put you here?" Laura pressed, lowering her voice. "Do you remember anything before waking up?" For a second, there was silence. Then the girl's eyes changed. They darkened, flickering with something mechanical, as if the neural interface inside her was adjusting. And then she whispered, "They're lying to you." A pulse of cold fear shot through Laura's veins. Decker straightened. "Who?" The girl turned to face him. "Everyone." The truth about Rhea. The words hung in the air, heavier than the artificial gravity holding them down. Laura's mouth felt dry. She forced herself to keep her voice steady. "What do you mean they're lying? Who's lying?" The girl blinked, her gaze distant, as if listening to something far beyond the walls of the ship. "Rhea is not real," she murmured. "It's a system, a projection, a program designed to make you believe in a world that does not exist." The floor seemed to drop out from under Laura's feet. "That's not possible," she breathed. "People live there. My sister." The girl turned to her, her gaze strangely sympathetic. "She's not where you think she is." Something inside Laura shattered. Decker clenched his jaw. "Then where the hell is she?" The girl closed her eyes for a brief moment as if searching. Then when she opened them again, her voice was lower. "Station 42. Laura's breath hitched. Station 42. That was their destination, not Rhea. Her stomach twisted violently. Decker's expression darkened. "We were never going to Rhea, were we?" The girl shook her head. Laura staggered backward, her hands trembling. For years, humanity had been told that Rhea was the answer, that those who won a visa were given the opportunity to leave the ruined Earth behind and live in paradise. But if Rhea wasn't real, where were those people actually being sent? Her sister? Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. If Ariane wasn't on Rhea, if she had been sent to Station 42 instead. A terrible thought slammed into her. Were the passengers of Cassandra meant to share the same fate? She turned to Decker, but before she could say a word, the ship's alarms blared. A warning flashed across the nearest monitor. "Unauthorized system breach. Security override in progress." Decker cursed, pulling Laura to her feet. Someone else is awake. The girl, 6A, lifted her gaze to them, her voice eerily calm. They know you've found me. Laura barely had time to process the words before the ship lurched violently, throwing them against the wall. Somewhere deep within the Cassandra, another sleeper was waking up. And this time, they weren't alone. Laura's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as she pushed herself forward, her body weightless in the absence of gravity. The ship's warning alarms blared in her ears, red lights flashing through the dim corridors of Cassandra. Every few seconds, the metal walls shuddered, groaning as if the ship itself was fighting against what was about to happen. This was it, the final moment. She clutched the data drive to her chest, the only proof of the truth. The only thing that could wake humanity up from the illusion that had kept them asleep for decades. Laura, you have to go. Decker's voice crackled through the communicator in her helmet. She twisted midair, looking back toward the cargo bay where he stood, his figure barely visible through the thick layers of steam and smoke escaping from the broken pressure seals. "I'm not leaving you behind," she yelled. "You don't have a choice." Decker's voice was tight with urgency. "The mainframe is set to blow. You need to transmit the message before it's too late." Her stomach twisted painfully. She knew he was right. They had come too far, uncovered too much. There was no turning back. The lie of Rhea had to end. Laura turned, propelling herself toward the transmission deck. The halls of the ship blurred past her in streaks of rusted metal and flickering lights. She could barely process the horrors she had uncovered in the last 24 hours. Rhea wasn't a paradise. It wasn't even real. The planet, once promised as humanity's salvation, was nothing more than an empty shell. A vast, uninhabitable wasteland. The people who had won visas to Rhea, they had never set foot on another world. They had been used, drained. Station 42 was the truth, the real destination where the so-called settlers were taken. Their bodies, their minds were harvested to sustain the simulation, to keep the illusion alive. For years, Kuiper Enterprises had been running the greatest deception in human history. They fed the last remnants of humanity a lie, a dream of something better, to keep them docile, to prevent them from realizing the Earth was still habitable. And now Laura was the only one who could reveal it all. She slammed into the control panel of the transmission deck, hands shaking as she activated the long-range signal. The screen flickered, struggling to stabilize amid the ship's failing systems. Come on," she whispered desperately. Behind her, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Lindbergh. Laura's fingers danced over the console, initiating the data upload. The files contained everything: footage from the ship, cryolog data, and the video confession of the young girl, 6A. Humanity, if you are seeing this, everything you believe is a lie. Laura's own face appeared on the screen, staring back at her as the live transmission began. Her voice trembled, but she spoke anyway. "My name is Dr. Laura Portman. I am on board the cargo ship Cassandra, a vessel belonging to Kuiper Enterprises, currently in orbit near Rhea." A deep breath. This was it. Rhea is not what they told us. It is not a home. It is not a sanctuary. It is a simulation. A blast shook the ship. Somewhere, something had ruptured, possibly the mainframe. She had minutes. Your loved ones who left for Rhea never made it. They were taken to Station 42, a facility where their bodies were used to sustain the illusion. The entire system is a lie designed to keep us from questioning the truth. A shadow moved behind her. Lindbergh was here. Laura! Decker's voice came again, but it was distant now, distorted by the interference. They're overriding the system. Send it now. She didn't hesitate. Laura slammed the final key, launching the transmission to every remaining space station still orbiting Earth. The file uploaded in full, the red status bar flashing 100% complete before the screen went black. No! Lindbergh's scream was the last thing Laura heard before she felt the impact of something slamming into her back. They tumbled together, crashing into the metal grating. Lindbergh was feral, blood on her uniform, her wild eyes filled with rage. "You don't know what you've done," Lindbergh snarled, grappling for control. "You think they'll believe you? You think people will give up their dream for your version of the truth?" Laura fought back, kicking Lindbergh off her. "They deserve to know. They deserve hope," Lindbergh spat, lunging again. "Even if it's a lie, it keeps them going. Without it, they'll tear each other apart." Laura dodged, grabbing onto the panel behind her for support. "Maybe," she panted, chest heaving. "But they deserve the choice." Lindbergh charged again. But this time, Laura was ready. She shifted at the last second, sending Lindbergh flying past her, directly into the gaping hole in the wall where an explosion had torn open part of the ship. The force of her momentum was too much. For a single terrible second, Lindbergh's fingers clawed at the edges, trying to hold on. Then she was gone. Laura turned away before she could see the body disappear into the void. She didn't have time to grieve. Her oxygen warning was flashing red. The ship was seconds away from collapse. "Decker," she gasped into the comms. "I sent the message. I sent everything." There was no response. Panic surged through her veins. "Decker, are you—" "Go, Laura," his voice finally came through, weak but insistent. "You did it. Now get out of here." Tears blurred her vision, but she nodded. She grabbed the small girl, 6A, who had been hiding in the corner of the transmission deck, clutching the VR implant at the base of her skull. The child's wide, too knowing eyes locked onto Laura's. "You freed them," the girl whispered. Laura pulled her close, securing the straps of her EVA suit. "Let's hope they stay free." She launched toward the escape pod bay, slamming her palm against the release panel. The airlock doors hissed open. She barely had time to strap herself in before the pod ejected, sending them hurtling away from Cassandra as the ship erupted into flames behind them. The last thing Laura saw before the shockwave consumed the vessel was the explosion of the mainframe antenna, the final severing of the lie that had kept humanity in the dark for so long. The transmission was sent, the illusion was shattered, and as Laura drifted through space, staring down at the distant glow of Earth below, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity had a choice now. The truth was out, and there was no going back.